Session is about posturing and how you can grow awareness and action in your community. So, what are we growing awareness and action about? So, awareness raising generally is to support a campaign. So, to start off this session, I'll introduce our 2025 Youth Voter Block campaign as an example of how we grow awareness and take action for a campaign. So, the Tomorrow Movement mission statement is what guides all of our campaigns, which is we are an unstoppable movement of young people fighting for a society with good jobs, great public services, and a safe climate for all. We are organising young people all over the country to fight for a tomorrow that works for everyone, not just big business. And in the 2025 election, we saw that as an opportunity to campaign for something better. So we went into the 2025 federal election knowing that Gen Z and millennials would make up close to 50% of the voting population, which meant that we had more power with our votes in 2025 than ever before. But we also know that our power is not just about voting. If we get out onto the streets and campaign in our communities, we knew that leading up to and also beyond the election, we would be able to be a political force and help shape power away from big business. And we wanted to amplify this story about youth power and get young people into the streets to shift power so that the government had to listen to us. So how do we achieve those goals? When we run campaigns, this is the journey that we are trying to get people on. We want to step people up in our community from just simply observing our campaigns up this ladder so they can take more action. With further engagement, we can step people up from observing the campaign to actively following the campaign, to endorsing, doing things like sharing their support and to contributing, maybe coming along to meetings or actions, to owning a piece of the campaign, for example, by being a committed member of a team, to being a leader in the campaign. Observing is the first step for folks engaging in our campaigns. When somebody is observing, they're passively receiving information. There's no commitment required, and they can engage anonymously. They may not know that they're part of the target audience. They may be skeptical or uncertain, and they need multiple touch points to make sure that they continue to be engaged. How do people observe our campaign? They would be observing our campaigns through things like printed materials, online platforms, as well as traditional media. So this is where posturing comes in. So posturing is an act of taking a printed material and attaching it to a surface in a public space. And what posturing does is that it increases the amount of people in your local area that are observing your campaign. So what does posturing actually achieve? So this image here is an analogy where you can think of the big fish as a big power, something like the government or big business that make us, the people, or the little fish feel like that we don't have any power. But this analogy shows that when we organize, when we come together, we can build our collective power. So how that relates to posturing, we post it because we want to encourage masses of people to take organized action together to challenge the status quo and to build a better world. When masses are organized together and united through mass social networks, we can be powerful enough to create mass change. Campaign organizing is using the resources we have to build the power we need to achieve the change we want. It aims to change power dynamics by creating a collection of people taking organized action for a collective goal, which is otherwise known as a social movement. When we think about campaigns, we can use this analogy. If you feed a person a fish, they can feed themselves for a day. If you teach a person to fish, they can feed themselves for a lifetime. But if the people in power are polluting the river, then you need a campaign. So this relates back to this social change ecosystem here that we have. There are different ways to create change. So when we think of a person being fed a fish to feed them for a day, we can think of personal transformation. Personal transformations are those that focus on changing the lives of individuals. Some examples for that are Headspace or Alcoholics Anonymous. The other part of this analogy is if you teach a person to fish, they will feed themselves for a lifetime. This is an analogy for building system alternatives, so building the world as we see it should be. Some examples are mutual aid kitchens, which feed everyone who comes by. But where we sit as Tomorrow Movement is in this space of seeing that the people in power are polluting the river, and so we need a campaign, we need a social movement, and we focus on changing dominant institutions, which means that we identify the institutions that make the biggest impact on our lives and build power to influence them. We need as many people as possible to be observing our campaign, to stepping people up into then following our campaign. But what does following our campaign mean? So if somebody is following our campaign, it means they have identified themselves as being interested in the campaign. There's minimal commitment, for example, just maybe sharing their contact details so they can keep updated. But this step moves them from a passive observer to this first small active step in the campaign per se. But yeah, why is providing opportunities to follow our campaign important? Providing opportunities to follow a campaign is important because it allows people to move from passive into that first active step. It also allows for personalized communication and relationship building based on the person's interest and capacity, as well as things like where they're located. But how do we move people into that following role? This could look like a person completing a single step form with their contact details, like a newsletter sign up on the Tomorrow Move It website or on a physical paper form. Postering as an action can be used to address to the first two rungs in this engagement ladder. For example, it allows people to observe the campaign, to hear about Tomorrow Movement, but by including something like a barcode in these examples here, it enables people to be sent to the sign up page so that they can take that first step to active participating and following the campaign. So now that we have covered, I guess, the purpose of engagement and postering through campaigns, let's talk about some practicalities. We want to just say up front that there are some potential legal considerations for postering. You can be charged with an offence for postering without consent of the occupier or owner of the space, which includes public spaces. There are also fines that differ in different jurisdictions for being caught putting up posters. If you are caught in the act or on CCTV postering, you can be charged with property damage or be told to remove the posters. So be aware of where you put up posters, where others have put up posters before, or specific posters that are designated for postering are the best places to put them without being, I guess, concerned of the legal consequences. Also, do not poster on private property without the consent of the occupier to do so. So keeping that in mind, best locations for posters. Think about foot traffic and the kinds of people you want to see your posters. Some common locations include on bollards, often, for example, on uni campuses. You could also put up a poster on a light pole. Think about busy footpaths in areas with high traffic. There, you could also put up a poster on public notice boards. And you could also ask businesses to put up your poster in their stalls. This leads us on to how can you do effective postering? So before you start postering, make a plan for printing. How will you print your posters? How many do you need? And will you need to distribute them to other people? Glue, are you making wheat glue paste or sourcing some packing tape and scissors, for example? Who will you ask to come along? Taking action with a friend or two will make it a lot more fun and you'll get a lot more done. So yeah, we'll definitely recommend doing it with other people. You might also want to think about where you're going to put up the posters. You could look on Google Maps or something beforehand, get a feel for where some key spots could be. That'll just help you do it a bit quicker whilst in place doing the postering. Also think about the time when you want to meet up to go postering. Different ways of doing postering. You can use sticky tape, is a bit less involved, it's easier to take down, means if you get asked to take a poster down, easy to do so. We'd recommend to use clear packing tape and tape for all of the four sides down. Also make homemade glue. Wheat paste helps the posters to generally stay up for longer. So how do you make wheat pasting? To make the glue, you can combine 1 part flour to 4 parts water in a large saucepan. Whisk constantly to prevent chunks from forming. Heat to just below a boil until it has reached the desired consistency, which is clearly a gluey consistency. Using wheat paste will stick best to wood and concrete, the porous material. To use the wheat paste, use a larger painter's brush to apply to the poster or onto the wall. Apply the poster on the wall and run another layer of glue on the top of the poster. There are also ways to make gluten-free pasting. So combine 2 parts cooked rice to 3 parts water in a blender. You can then transfer it to a saucepan and heat for about a minute until the consistency is a glue-like paste. There's also a lot of different options on the internet. If you need to avoid gluten for whatever reason, you can use different flour like corn flour or rice flour. Thanks for watching. That is the end of video on postering and awareness raising.